everybody. It won't take long, but I would like to formally open this year's Sommerdiskurs. In fact, as you know, the summer school here exists for almost 75 years. It was founded in 1949 as a student encounter for American and Austrian students, and it has always been a peace project. And what we are doing here is we bring together people from all over the world, particularly students, and try to involve them in European and Austrian culture, and teach here in an interdisciplinary way. And we try to, and when I took over here the directorship 15 years ago, our idea was to use this unique atmosphere here, where we have so many brilliant students and interesting faculty members, also to open the campus here to the general public and to create this dialogue between scholars and civil society, between scientists and important persons from the business world, NGOs and government experts, in order to discuss current issues. And it turned out that we had many crises to face over the last 15 years. And so last year, when we invented this year's general theme, I thought that it was time for a rather optimistic general theme. Yeah? So we chose curiosity, which then turned out to be also the motto of our Nobel Prize winning colleague. Yeah? Curiosity as a positive force, yeah? The human mind being able to come up with solutions, innovations, yeah? But somehow, I'm afraid that the current state of the world, yeah, and also many developments, among them also the increasing use of AI, does not give only reason to optimism, yeah? And so somehow we will not be able just to talk about optimistic visions of the future, but I'm looking very much forward to the opening speech, to the keynote speech by my dear colleague Nikolaus Forgo, who always helps me also to design the Sommerdiskurs, and I would like to thank him particularly for his initiatives and also his dedication to this project, as well as my other dear colleagues from our faculty, who always will take an active role over the next 2 days. Sylvia Kritzinger tomorrow morning, and then Bernhard Schiemer, Oliver Radkolb, Ursula Griebaum, Werner Neudeck on Friday. So we are looking forward very much to all your contributions. And now I don't need to introduce Nikolaus Forgo here in this place. Yeah? He is certainly the best known and most renowned expert on IT law in Austria, and he's professor of IT law at the University of Vienna, where he also is the head of the Department of Innovation and Digitalization, and founder of the 25 years ago of the LLM program on information and media law, as it is now called. Dear Nikolaus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very much looking forward to this. It's an experiment, and you need to go through this experiment together with me now. But the advantage I have is that it's quite costly to leave, right? So you need to go through this now. Probably at least. So let's start with some questions. Did we recently have a pandemic and or a health crisis? Is COVID-19 more severe than the flu? Did vaccination help in the fight against the pandemic? Were curfews necessary and proportionate? Were school closings necessary and proportionate? How many people died from COVID-19 and would have died if we had reacted differently? Is climate change real? How will global warming develop in the next 50 years? Is it necessary to cut carbon emissions, and if so, by which means? Is all this climate change discussion coordinated by someone in order to achieve other left or right political goals? Who won the last US presidential election? How many people were at Trump's inaugural lecture? Who started the war in Ukraine? Did the US ever fly to the moon? Is the Earth flat? Was 9/11 an inside job? Let's take just one of these questions, perhaps one of the easier ones, which is, was 9/11 an inside job? When I start Googling this is what I see, was 9/ and the rest is automatically added by Google. So when I take this as a convenience, and I then ask Google whether 9/11 was an inside job, I get 26,400,000 results. 26,400,000 results. Let's assume, just for a second, that we want to check this out, so that we want to read those results. And let's assume that you need just 10 seconds for every single search result. This means 8.25 years, 24/7, 10 seconds per search result. 8.25 years. And that's just Google. You haven't watched any video yet in that moment, so let's assume that you also look on YouTube, where you find another 1,000,000 results on that questions, and let's assume again that you visit just every single of those videos for just 2 minutes, although many of them last 2 hours or so. So just 2 minutes, just to briefly drop in. That's another 3.8 years, 24/7 watching videos. And you haven't looked into any other social media yet, then probably would need to visit Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, and so on. And probably we would end with a watching, reading time longer than the rest of my life. So nothing else to do with the rest of our life, just to answer what was reported so far on this one single question. And the problem, in a way, gets worse, because with the example of YouTube, you have there 500 hours of video upload in every single minute, 24/7, every single minute. So this means if I should start now, doing nothing else but just reading and watching, I will, however, not finish during my lifetime because it's exponentially growing. So let's assume then that I check just one single of the many social media sites that I mentioned before, just for one example, and I choose, by coincidence, Twitter. I will come back to Twitter in a minute or two. And when I start using Twitter and I ask Twitter whether 9/11 was an inside job, I don't need to go into any detail, because the very first tweet that I see is a statement indicating that 9/11 was indeed an inside job. So the very first of, again, I don't know, 100 million tweets about the issue. There's one of the most influential allegories in Western human philosophy, which is the allegory of Plato written in the Republic about the cave. And in short, the picture he's drawing is that there are people held in a cave. There is some light coming from a fire. The only thing that they can see is the wall. People bring all kinds of real objects passing the fire, and the only thing that those people sitting here are able to see are the shadows of the things that are carried along. And over here, this is nature, this is reality, this is where you could go to if you were not in the cave. To them, Plato writes, I said, the truth would be literally nothing. To them means the prisoners in the cave. The truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. So who decides on the images? And more importantly, perhaps, who decides on the order of the images? Since Lawrence Lessig, who wrote a very influential book in 1999, Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace, we know that our behavior on the internet is determined not only by law, but also by three other factors, most importantly by what Lessig calls the architecture, which is the environment, the infrastructure, the machines all of us needed then to use. When you transfer this, and that's the first statement of this presentation here, when you transfer this from 1999 to 2023, there are two important differences. First, there is no longer such thing like online versus offline behavior, because everything is online. And second, architecture is no longer just architecture, it's an AI-driven architecture already now. Whatever you use on the internet at the moment, be it YouTube, be it Google Maps, be it Meta, be it whatever, all of those deciding on what we see are deciding using artificial intelligence, all of them, and not only since 2022. Everything happens online today. As I said, the average adolescent has a screen time today of more than 7 hours, and half of the US teens answer to the question how often they use the internet almost constantly. And trust me, I'm a father of 2 children in that age. When children say almost constantly, they mean almost constantly. Everything, therefore, happens online, and everything is sorted already now using artificial intelligence. The situation in 2022, perhaps, was everyone was online, the platforms were organizing or are organizing what we see. The humans are still in the position to somehow create the content. So it's you taking the picture and you deciding then to upload that on Instagram. It's a human decision. But the content is curated by AI. So it's not you, and it's not a human deciding who is going to see your Instagram post or your tweet or whatever. Humans deciding on the images, machines deciding on the order of the images. Importantly, this presentation is given in Europe. And Europe, as I mentioned already on Sunday in my opening for my class here, Europe is in a specifically tricky position here that was beautifully described by the European Network Information Security Agency, so an official authority of the European Union, in 2019 by this picture. What you see here is a hamburger, and the patty in the middle, that's Europe, right? The hardware industry is one half, and the US industry is the other half of the bread. The patty in the middle is Europe. And since this was printed, the situation has not become better. This is how an Internet Minute looked in 2018. And you don't need to read any of the details here. There are just 2 facts which are important. First, it's just a few platforms. Second, none of them is European. That was in 2018. In 2021, we have one important change. First, all the numbers grew again, so more and more of everything. And second, we have a new player here, which is TikTok. So this ENISA picture from 2019 indicating that on the one hand you have US software, on the other hand you have Asian hardware, is no longer true. We have a very, very quickly growing new app here, a new kid around the block, which is TikTok. And TikTok is a remarkably interesting example, because at the moment, just to give you some things about the figures, there are 167 million TikTok videos viewed in every single minute. And every single TikTok user uses TikTok roughly more than 1.5 hours per day. So if you have that on your phone, as an average, you use it 1.5 hours per day. This is, by the way, also true for Austrian youth, so there are figures indicating that Austria is not different on this. In one of the surveys that I'm aware of, where children between 15 and 19 were asked, you see that TikTok in 2022 was by far the fastest growing app. And one might ask, actually as an elderly gray-haired man, one might ask why TikTok, and why is this so successful? Why is that so attractive? And the answer is, I think, relatively simple. It has something to do with the addictive nature of the algorithm. So the algorithm, in some way, is different from the algorithm of other of those social media platforms. And this is because the algorithm comes from, as it's stated in one of the articles that I was referencing to in the last slide, because the algorithm comes from combining machine learning with fantastic volumes of data, highly engaged users, and a setting where users are amenable to consuming algorithmically recommended content. So just to remember you, it's humans who decide on the image, also on TikTok, but it's TikTok, a non-European machine, deciding on the order. And so how do we know then in our cave what is real, whether 9/11 was an inside job or not? The first requirement is somehow we need to believe someone telling us something about that. No one of us was there. No one of us saw the airplane flying. Everything that we know about this is coming to us via media. Everything we are knowing about this is coming to us via media that is pre-selected by algorithms. So we need to believe someone somehow, and we need to trust someone somehow. We need to trust someone telling us this was not an inside job. COVID was a pandemic. COVID is more dangerous than the flu, and so on. We need to believe and we need to trust someone. Yuval Noah Harari, who was a very important influence for this presentation, and I highly recommend you to read him if you haven't done so yet. He's publishing a lot on artificial intelligence at the moment. Yuval Noah Harari, a historian by training and by profession, makes several arguments, rather fundamental arguments, answering the question why humans are as they are and why we are successful as a species. And one of the most concise answers that Harari suggests is there are two reasons why humans are successful on this planet. The first reason is we are able to collaborate in very large numbers, different from any other animal. We can work together, thousands or millions of us. Via communication, we can guarantee that everyone is doing her job properly. And in order to achieve this, we are very able and capable to tell each other stories, which the others then need to believe. And Harari argues that more or less everything which surrounds us, money, power, law, you name it, are stories. And we need to believe them, and we need someone to trust in order to be able to believe. These stories, in a way, importantly, are somehow just like the shadows that Plato's figures see, because nobody was there. Nobody really was out here seeing the airplane or the virus or the election. And those stories are told to us via words or images or videos, and we need to believe and we need to trust each other. We need to trust at the end, therefore, non-European machines. And where does this lead to? Let's just have one closer look again into this 9/11 issue. When I'm asking ChatGPT whether 9/11 was an inside job, the outcome that I get is rather outbalanced in the sense of that the program doesn't really want to tell me how many people believe that it was an inside job. It's a typical ChatGPT answer, which is relatively vague on the rather precise question whether 9/11 was an inside job. What I, however, get as an outcome here from ChatGPT is that some polls have suggested that something between 10 to 30% of the US population believe somehow in some kind of conspiracy theory related with 9/11. And there are more figures on this indicating quite the same situation. This is another one. So 11% of the US population strongly believing that 9/11 was an inside job, 12% somehow believing this, and so on. And just very, very tightly, the majority doesn't believe that this was an inside job. Strongly disbelieves 45%, or somehow disbelieves. So there is a significant amount of people believing that 9/11 was an inside job. And when I go, me personally, on YouTube, and by coincidence I know that one of the most influential films indicating that 9/11 was an inside job is called Loose Change, and put this into the search engine of YouTube, because I don't want to watch all the millions that I mentioned before, this is what I see when I am on YouTube. On the one hand, I see a Wikipedia entry that was coming from YouTube there. So somebody at YouTube decided that I should read about 9/11 from a trustworthy source, such as 9/11, before then reading the claim of the creator of the film, which is that the film proves that the planes, or the impact of the two planes, is false. And it's roughly about 700,000 people who watched that film in the last 2 years. It's edited by someone or something which is called Jacko TV. And when I'm watching this then, or seeing this on YouTube, the question that I need to answer is, I need to believe and I need to trust someone. And either I believe Jacko TV, or I believe and I trust Wikipedia, which is the alternative provided to me in this moment. So Wikipedia or Jacko TV, or Twitter, or my parents, or any teacher, or the government, or science. In late 2022, just another iPhone moment happened in my life. iPhone moment means, in my reading, that you will remember this moment as something separating the time before and the time after that event. And in relation to computers, this was probably the 5th iPhone moment in my life. The first one was the computer. The second one was the PC. The third one was the internet. Then the mobile phone and mobile phone usage on the internet, the iPhone, actually. And then it's ChatGPT. And I would assume that this is not only the case for me, but there are plenty of people out there who see this as something which changes at least their relation with digital environments in a size comparable with mobile phones or the internet. And there are figures indicating that this is probably a true assumption. This is, for example, a graph showing how many days it took until an app got its first million users. How many days for 1 million users? In the case of ChatGPT, it took them 5 days. 5 days for the first million users. By the way, importantly, this is no longer the fastest growing app on the planet. There's a new one, which is called Threads, which is a competitor to Twitter, published by Meta, so by Zuckerberg and his company. It took them 1 hour to meet the first million of people. And I would assume that at least all the Europeans in the room are not really aware of that yet, which has regulatory reasons, by the way, because Meta decided not to publish this yet in Europe because of some issues that might come out of the regulation. I will come back to that a little bit later. ChatGPT, since then, since autumn 22, has seen growth rates which are very remarkable. These are the monthly growth rates of visits on ChatGPT in the first month of its existence, and you will see that this is a rather exponential growth on a monthly basis. Very, very fast growing audience. And what is this? It's a generative, pre-trained transformer, and as ChatGPT tells us, this means that it's able to generate text. It's pre-trained, which means that humans invested quite some time into making this machine able to seemingly write proper English or German or whatsoever. And there's a transformative element in it, which means that not every outcome is identical. So there is some lottery in it, some gambling in it, how the personal outcome might look like. Again, importantly, just like with all the other almost all the other social media websites that I was referring to before, all this is given to all of us seemingly for free. This is the ChatGPT 3.5 answer, which is the free version answer. So you can use this and play around. And one of the questions that I will try to answer a little later will be, why is this? So why is this for free? First remark for the moment, this looks literally very much like the web looked like in 1992. It's purely text, it's gray, it's rather annoying, it's boring. What you see here on the right hand, this is the internet or the World Wide Web in 1992. Quite similar in my view. Some specificities, just to remind you of this. First, a large language model doesn't know anything about the world. So different from a search engine, nobody programming a large language model claims that they know or that they represent something outside the cave. It's just about producing language. It produces language by calculating the probability that a word is followed by another word. And because it's advisable not to produce always the same text, there is, as I said, some gambling, some lottery in this. It needs to be pre-trained by humans so far, so there were plenty of people indicating whether or not an answer was a proper answer to the question. And importantly, this whole system is permanently trained by its users. So whenever you are using ChatGPT, this is possibly also the answer for why this is free. Whenever you are using ChatGPT, you are training the system. And you can even indicate actively how much you liked the outcome for this very reason. If you click on that thumbs up button over there, this means, okay, the system knows this was a proper answer. If you regenerate the answer, then most likely you did not like it, and you can even actively indicate that you dislike the answer. So this is constantly trained by all of us. And remember the European situation that I was referring to at the beginning. So if machines need to decide on the order, it would then perhaps be rather important to know at least what is in the lottery, so what could be the outcome, and in order to know about the possible outcome and the possible order, it would be necessary to know about the input. So what is put into this, what is producing, what is the basis out of which such a large language model produces proper English or proper German. And the bad news I have here for those of you who haven't read the terms and conditions yet, and who reads terms and conditions, so the bad news I have here is, despite of the fact that this is called OpenAI, they are very closed when it comes to the source, where all this knowledge comes from. So ChatGPT tells me that ChatGPT doesn't have access to its training data, but that it was trained on a mixture of licensed data created by human trainers, and publicly available data. OpenAI has not yet publicly disclosed the specifics of the individual data sets used. So nobody knows. You do not know only about the order, you do not know about the source either. And that's not only true for OpenAI. You'll find exactly the same problem with the Meta version of OpenAI, which is called Llama. And one of the arguments, the selling arguments Meta is using, is that this is supposed to be open or open source. And again, the same situation also here, no clear indication where the data comes from. This is even funnier in a way, because they even on top of this tell you that they made an effort to remove data from certain sites, but you don't really know which sites, known to contain a high volume of personal information. And third, last not least, the same thing is true for Google and Bard, which is the OpenAI or ChatGPT equivalent from Google. So, to sum this up, we don't know where the content comes from. And chances are quite high that this is not going to change. One of the regulatory approaches of the US that are more recent is that the White House has published an agreement with the big players in the market, and there's quite a lot in there about trustworthiness and the usual, legal speak that all of us read when we read such terms and conditions in ChatGPT and similar applications, but nothing about transparency when it comes to the sources. And Meta, for example, strategically and for clearly legal reasons, by the way, stopped disclosing which data they used in order to train the AI models. And I haven't mentioned China yet, despite of the fact that the second important global player in these markets obviously is China, developing very similar products right in the moment. So this iPhone moment in autumn 2022 produced quite some text about this sensation. And in a way, also my presentation is an offspring of this hype coming out of this in autumn 2022. And the reason given by many why this is such an iPhone moment was that it's developing so quickly. The warp speed in which all this is growing, and in the warp speed in all this is consumed and produced. And in this article from Fortune, you see then some reasoning about why this is such an iPhone moment. And Fortune writes, citing a report on the matter, that there are 4 reasons why ChatGPT-like technology is pushing AI forward, like in an iPhone moment. It's democratizing data by making it more available. It's being adopted by a large number of people. It spurred technological development at warp speed, and it has numerous use cases. Of course, being a nasty and boring lawyer, myself, this is the term that I'm most interested in here, which is that this is supposed to democratize data by making it more available. And let me just repeat, 160 million TikTok videos every minute. And let's just add another figure now, 8 billion Google Lens users in a month. Google Lens is this tiny little app that you have on your phone where you can take a picture and ask Google then whether Google knows what you see, right? 8 billion users every month. TikTok, China, Google, the US, and then we have an Austrian startup such as Sanus-X. This is just a random one that I chose because I know a little bit about them. So Sanus-X is an average Austrian startup. And what they want to do is that inter alia, they want to develop an AI application, which is in a way probably the most prominent AI application everybody is aware of, which is a better diagnosis of skin cancer. Presumably, AI is already now rather good in diagnosing skin cancer, possibly better than many humans. So imagine you are Sanus-X, an Austrian startup. You are in this health environment. This is a graph published by the Austrian Ministry of Health about the Austrian health system. So you are here, right? That's the patient, right? So you are an average Austrian health startup in this data situation, and you want to catch up. You want to compete. And the problem with competing and the problem with catching up in competition is if you want to catch up, you need to run faster than the leader. So you are an average startup, you need to run faster as Google. That, of course, is already in that market, and of course is not only in that market, but already actively helps you in understanding how Google Lens, this is this tiny little thing that I was mentioning before, helps you to make your life easier by using it to find answers to common skin conditions, such as skin cancer. And interestingly, Google even tells you no worries about the regulatory implications that might have. We are even actively asked for a Class 1 medical device certification under European law. So no worries, it's going to work. And if you are a layperson not really able to use that properly, no worries about that, because on top of this, you can also see on the internet very easily just 100+ ChatGPT commands how to ask ChatGPT and Google Lens whether this really is skin cancer. And the question that I would therefore like to answer would be, how could Europe then finally make data more available and make a data-driven society prosper? Because this is certainly one of the key goals of all of us, and even more certainly, it's one of the key goals of this commission. This commission that came into power in 2019 wrote, or the president of this commission wrote a digital agenda very early when she came into office, and there are quite some interesting sentences in this digital agenda. One of them was already mentioned on Sunday, it may be too late to replicate hyperscalers, but it is not too late to achieve technological sovereignty in some critical technology areas. So we do not even try anymore, seemingly, to become the next Google or the next Meta. But it also has, in addition, something about the human and ethical implications of AI in it already in 2019. And von der Leyen then, in 2019, announced that within her first 100 days in office, she would start to work on AI legislation, helping to better control the human and ethical implications of artificial intelligence. That was in 2019. Since then, the situation in Europe looks like this. This is a meme from a German lawyer. What you see on the presented on the internet, what you see on the upper left corner is GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, the nice little kitty, right? And the more you go down here, the more, how should I call it, strange the animals become, more threatening the animals become. And importantly, neither the AI Act nor the European Health Data Space Act are yet on this meme. So what we have been seeing in the last 4 years is a tremendous activity of the European legislator in the digital arena, with quite some acts already in force and quite some acts which are very close to being agreed on, most likely still under this mandate. So at least for the Data Act and for the AI Act, and possibly also for the European Health Data Space Act, I think most people believe that this will still be agreed on under this mandate. So we see a lawmaker on steroids. Missing, in my view at least, this is the critical part of this presentation, most of the relevant points. Let's start with one example about why Europe is missing most of the relevant points. Those of you who are into data protection might know that there's an Austrian citizen called Max Schrems, who has been actively fighting now for, 12 or 15 years against the transfer of personal data from Europe to the US by a company like Meta, or Facebook as it was then called. There are 2 court decisions of the Court of Justice of the European Union, both of them with the outcome that the legal basis that allowed the transfer to the US was declared to be void by the court. And we are going to see now a third debate on this because we have a new legal basis now, and again, the very interesting question will be whether this is a proper legal basis. This is not my example here, this is just a reminder. My example is the following. When the Irish Data Protection Authority, after more than 10 years of legal discussion on this matter, finally came up with a decision to fine Meta because of a breach or for a breach of GDPR by transferring data into the US and by fining them with a fee of 1.200 billion euro. That was the fine. That's a quite significant amount of money. That was the reaction on the market. That's the share of Meta. And this is the moment the decision was published. So 1.2 billion euro fine produces a peak in the price of the share. And quite the same thing, I would assume, or I would offer you as a prognosis, will happen here when it comes to ChatGPT. Just like with Meta, we have now started to see that ChatGPT might trigger quite some privacy issues. There are data protection authorities starting to investigate this. Inter alia, the German data protection authority is starting to investigate this with very, very little impact on market developments. Just to give you one example, in June 19, 2023, Google was not yet publishing their ChatGPT equivalent on European markets because of possible regulatory issues. No later than a month later, it is now available for European customers. And I'm not sure whether all these privacy issues that might come with this system were sorted out within a month. Might also be that there is an economic decision taken, which is take the risk. And it will take 15 years, and it will cost 1.2 billion euro, and it will be worth it. A lawmaker on steroids, missing the most important and most relevant points now in the field that this commission is responsible for. Let me give you one or two or three. I could probably give you 50 examples of this. The first one is the following. Each of those acts that I mentioned is coming with at least one new authority. So the big winner of this game are lawyers at the moment, because we will need plenty of them for all the authorities administering those new acts. And each of those new acts has a principle which is GDPR remains untouched, which is specifically great news for all the data protection lawyers, because we will have plenty of work to do just in order to sort out how you could ever manage this. On the one hand, GDPR, and on the other hand, Data Act or Data Governance Act or whatsoever. Austria, by the way, we are in Austria, and therefore please allow me this remark, is a very early adopter in this tendency. Our State Secretary, Turski, one of the very first things that he announced was, actually we need an artificial intelligence authority quickly, and we need it even earlier than this act is put into its existence. In the Data Governance Act, second example, you have something like data intermediation services. That's not really an authority, but that's an attempt to create a new market. The new market should be a market where someone can put data to this intermediation service, and someone can then ask to get this data. So an intermediary, right? And my question, I just ask that rhetorically at the moment, is whether you believe that this is something which is needed in Europe in order to make us less struggling with our being behind in data and data management. I could ask you the same question rhetorically with this even more bizarre, excuse my French, with this even more bizarre idea that there should be data altruism possibilities and organizations. This is literally the Article 16 indicating as a problem that all of us might have the inner wish to altruistically share data, even more than we are already at the moment sharing data. And if we should feel that wish, then these national data altruism organizations will help us in doing so, and this will help all of us in Europe, okay? Or in the Data Act. In the Data Act, you have this funny idea that data that is generated by the use of a product or a related service, that such data, for example, you buy a fridge and the fridge produces some data, right? So the funny idea is now that this data should be accessible to the user, directly accessible to the user. So you should be put in the position to then tell the manufacturer of your fridge, listen, I want to get access to that data because I want to trade that, or I want to do something with my fridge's data, which is per se, again, excuse my French, already a rather bizarre idea in my view. But it's getting even more bizarre when you put this then into relation with Article 4, stating that the user might have this right, but only if it's in line with trade secrets, right? So if there is a trade secret at stake, then please, user, sorry, we can't really do this. And now imagine that you are a user using ChatGPT, and the first thing that comes into your mind is, well, there is this Article 3 of the upcoming Data Act, and I will start an argument with Meta or Google whether I could get access to this data, and Google and Meta and so on will then have a lot of fun in arguing, well, actually either there's a trade secret or you are preparing a competing service, which is also a factor excluding this data access. And last not least, the AI Act. The fundamental idea of the AI Act looks like this. On the left side, you see the Commission's version. On the right side, you see the Parliament's version. And please don't ask me why they changed the color, because the statement is the same, which is you can separate AI applications by relating them with specific risks. And the higher the risk, the stricter the regulation, which is a very simple idea, and possibly even a rather convincing idea, at least in the first view. The problem now is that if you are within the high-risk system category, there is so much red tape coming with this that the message to our average startup might be, just don't do it, you will not afford it, because you need all kinds of risk management, data governance, and reliability measures, and so on. However, I think this fundamental approach, again, misses some of the more important points. And I cannot discuss in detail the first one, which is what is AI. I can just share with you that after being quite active in the domain for quite some time, I still haven't read any proper definition of AI, and in particular the definition given by the legislator is not really sufficient to answer that question. But that's not so much of interest to me today. The other question is more important to me today, which is, what is high risk? How do you decide whether something is high risk? And when you read the explanations in the documents, you find sentences like this one. This is one from the Commission proposal stating, okay, something is high risk if it imposes regulatory burdens. So we need those regulatory burdens only when the AI system is likely to pose high risks to fundamental rights and safety. Likely to pose high risks to fundamental rights and safety. So what is this? And under which conditions is this happening? That something, an AI system that I cannot really define, poses high risks to fundamental rights and safety. Might this be an answer? Does this pose high risks to my fundamental rights and safety? That there is a significant amount of Americans believing that 9/11 didn't exist or was an inside job? Is this a fundamental risk to my personal rights and safety? This is the deviation that we've seen this year when it comes to the Antarctic sea ice. That might be perhaps a risk when you put it into relation with this interesting statement of the Austrian Federal Chancellor in one of his declarations, where he recently said that there is no scientific proof for the hypothesis of a climate catastrophe or apocalypse. Is this a high risk to my fundamental rights and safety, that Europe has a rather long tradition now in lagging behind world leaders when it comes to the development of digital instruments? This is from the official, one of the official publications on the competitiveness of Europe in comparison with other areas of the world. Ending in 2018, this is the most recent data that I could get, or that the Commission published on this. And this is interesting in my view, because what you see here, this is the average Europe, right? This is the average Europe, and there are others, such as China, already in 2018 being quite efficient in running faster than the leader. These figures are 5 years old, that's true. However, it might be that things haven't changed too significantly since then. And let me just show you 2 tweets of one of the commissioners in charge of this to indicate that things might not have changed too intensely. On the left side of the screen, you see the French commissioner Thierry Breton tweeting on the very day Musk bought Twitter, that Twitter will fly by our rules, meaning DSA and DMA, Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act. And on the right hand, you see Monsieur Breton just some days ago in the area here in Salzkammergut, together with the Austrian commissioner, indicating that they had an in-depth discussion somewhere in the Salzkammergut. I don't know whether any of you recognizes the lake. I don't know. I don't think that it's ours. It's Sankin, is it? Okay, is it the Wolfgang Lake? Okay, so then it's quite close. Okay, and reflecting on the first 4 years and preparing the success of the final year of the mandate with the support of our respective political families in the heart of Austria, so further developing this success story. This is in a way the PR or the message the Commission or some members of the Commission deliver on the issue of digital competitiveness, because Monsieur Breton is inter alia responsible for the Digital Markets Act, which is one of the interesting pieces here. When you then look into, I'm sorry, I will need another 5 minutes roughly. When you then look into this from a legal perspective, what is high risk according to the legislator? You find Article 6, and you find, if you read Article 6, which you don't need to do now, you find an annex, and within the annex, a random list of products or markets in which products or services might be developed that are by definition of high risk. And then you find another interesting addition to this, which is Annex 3, which gives another random list of high-risk systems. And one of the examples mentioned in Annex 3 on high-risk systems, meaning if you are a startup, better don't try, and we have plenty of regulation available for you. As one of those here, an AI system that is intended to assist the judicial authority in researching and interpreting facts and the law, and in applying the law to a concrete set of facts. Importantly, it says assist. So this is not robo-judge, right? It's just about something which assists in deciding. So roughly speaking, this is the end of RDB and similar services, which of course assist in interpreting the law. I don't know whether this is really a high risk that we are facing at the moment, and I'm not paid by RDB or something, right? It's just to make that clear. Okay. So the last question for the last 2 minutes. What is then high risk according to me or to my reading? And I'm referring again to Harari, who said several very smart things on this, I think. The first remark that I want to share with you is, we are the first generation living on Earth not having a clue how life will look like in 50 years, for many reasons, one of them being AI. What, for example, if AI started to train AI so that you no longer need humans in order to pre-train the data? And there are technicians believing that we are rather close to that already. Second Harari remark. He says that social media is so successful because it grabs our attention. We always want to be informed about something, about people we like, etc. And he says that artificial intelligence might grab our emotions. And there are already examples for this available. So for example, this robot here, which is used in Japan to comfort the elderly. And this works because the elderly, being confronted with this machine, tend, like all of us, to anthropomorphize artificial intelligence. So we believe that it is something like us, as if it were a human. And there's a very prominent example for this. That's Black Lemoine. You might have read about that person. There was a huge article in Die Zeit. That's a Google engineer who was fired because he was of the opinion that the Google AI system had achieved consciousness, and he wanted to help that system in order to protect their rights, right? And the interesting point for me now here is not whether or not that is true, and I'm, by the way, of the opinion that it's not true. The interesting point for me is that it's a very good example that people tend to see this as if it were a human. You even risk your job in order to protect this against some kinds of dangers coming. And this combined with a memory that the elderly among us might have, which is to this machine somewhere 40 years ago, which came with a very, very big promise then, which is it's your personal computer. You can do with this whatever you want. It gives you a lot of freedom all the time. So this universal personal machine might be replaced by something which is a universal personal AI. So what about if all of us were just connected in some way with something comforting us in everything that we need, not just in searching, not just in figuring out whether 9/11 was an inside job or not, but in everything. You are hungry, you should eat, you should sleep more, whatsoever, etc. And that has started already, and there's just one indicator for this. I could give you many of them. The indicator that I'm using is my watch. So this is a typical sports watch, and I was very interested to see that more and more people also here in Strobl wear these watches, right? And they are very useful. One of the nice things they are doing is they are grading me every day how I slept, right? I get a grade every day about my sleeping habits, and that's obviously just one example. People like this, right? Some people, at least, like this. So what should we do then? We heard already one answer today. I just have a second very brief answer. I think we need more legal theory on this before deciding on laws and before running into panic. But we need to be careful. And if you're interested in the matter, there's about 200 hours more on YouTube. I'm responsible for, and I would appreciate if you consumed some of them. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.